Close your eyes and imagine an ancient city slowly falling asleep. Stone streets still warm from the sun. Oil lamps flickering in the twilight. The distant sound of waves touching the harbor. In this city lives a man who owns everything and yet wants nothing. He was born into wealth, into power, into privilege. He could have ruled. He could have commanded armies. He could have shaped laws. But he walked away, not in anger, not in fear, but in quiet disgust. His name was Heraclitus, a philosopher who believed that most people live their entire lives without ever truly waking up. He said that human beings do not listen. They do not think. They do not see. They repeat words. They follow crowds. They cling to illusions. And because of this, he chose to leave them behind. He went into the mountains. He slept beneath the open sky. He ate wild plants and bitter roots. He spoke to fire, to rivers, to silence. He believed that everything flows, that nothing stands still. That change is the only truth. Yet his own life ended in a way so strange, so disturbing, that it still confuses historians today. Some say he covered himself in animal dung, hoping to cure his illness. Some say he was buried alive. But perhaps the strangest question is not how he died, but why he chose to live the way he did. Why did one of the greatest minds of antiquity turn his back on humanity? What did he understand that others could not? Tonight, we will walk into the darkness of Heraclitus' thoughts and discover why he chose solitude over society, truth over comfort, and silence over the noise of mankind. Part 1. Twilight of Ephesus and the Birth of Solitude Introduction. The Shadow Inside the Temple of Artemis. Welcome to ASMR Dreams. Listen carefully, because tonight we are not speaking about a man. We are speaking about a flame that chose to go out for the world in order to burn forever in emptiness. We are speaking about Heraclitus of Ephesus. They called him the Dark One. They called him the Weeping Philosopher. They called him the Obscure. But before all else, he was a man who understood something terrifying. Truth does not unite people. Truth separates the one who sees from those who remain blind. Imagine Ephesus at the end of the 6th century before our era, one of the richest cities of Ionia, a crossroads of merchants, politicians, sailors, and schemers. A city where gold flows like water, and in the air hangs the mixed scent of spices, incense, and cheap slave blood. Above all of this rises the colossal temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And into the cold silence between its marble columns, one day steps a man named Heraclitus, son of Blosson. He does not bring a sacrificial ram. He does not bring gold. He brings a scroll. His book, a book about nature, a book about the hidden law of the universe. He places it upon the altar as if saying, "This is not for you. This is for the goddess, or for the very few whose souls have not yet turned into wet mud." Why did he hate people? With this question, we begin our journey into the mountains and into the darkness. The curse of blood and the rejection of the throne. Heraclitus was not a beggar, not a madman, not a wandering drunk. He was an aristocrat to the marrow of his bones. He belonged to the royal line of the Codrids, the legendary founders of Ephesus. By birthright, he was entitled to the title of Basileus King. In that time, a Basileus was not a battlefield monarch, but a sacred ruler, a guardian of rituals, an overseer of public sacrifices, a symbol of divine order. It was a position of enormous prestige and silent, irresistible power. And Heraclitus refused it. He voluntarily handed the title to his brother. Imagine the faces of the city elders. Imagine the whispers. In a world where men kill for a fragment of authority, one man simply gives it away. Why? Because Heraclitus had already understood. To rule people is like herding squealing pigs who cannot hear the music of the spheres. He once said that he preferred to play knucklebones with children near the temple rather than conduct politics with the citizens of Ephesus. When asked, "Why do you play with children, Heraclitus?" he answered, "Is this not better than governing the likes of you?" Here lies the root of his misanthropy. Not rage, not bitterness, but intellectual disgust. He believed that most humans live inside private hallucinations, deaf to the Logos, the universal law that governs all things. To him, the people of Ephesus were asleep. Have you ever tried to explain the structure of the cosmos to a sleeping person? They mumble, they turn over. They continue dreaming of comfort and gain. Logos against the crowd for Heraclitus. Logos was not merely reason. Logos was the living order of reality, the cosmic fire, the hidden rhythm of becoming, a fire that ignites by measure and extinguishes by measure. He wrote, "Although this Logos exists forever, people are unable to understand it before they hear it and after they hear it." He despised not only the ignorant masses, he despised famous intellectuals. He attacked Homer, Hesiod, Pythagoras. Much learning does not teach wisdom. He believed that these celebrated thinkers collected facts, but never touched essence. They saw many things, but not the one flame behind all things. Humanity, to Heraclitus, was divided into two groups, the very few who seek eternal worth, and the many who stuff their bellies like cattle. The exile of Hermodorus. The final fracture came with the exile of Hermodorus. Hermodorus was the only man in Ephesus whom Heraclitus truly respected. Wise, just, capable. The city expelled him. Their reasoning, "Let none among us be the best. And if someone is the best, let him live elsewhere among others." When Heraclitus heard this, something inside him died. He wrote, "The Ephesians should all hang themselves, every grown man, and leave the city to the children, for they expelled Hermodorus, the most worthy among them." At that moment, Heraclitus understood. Society does not nurture greatness. It rejects it. It seeks comfort, mediocrity, warm collective slime, and so he chose to leave, not only politics, not only society, human civilization itself. The departure into the mountains, he left Ephesus alone. No servants, no supplies, no safety. He walked into the wild mountains surrounding the city. Rock, wind, cold rain, burning sun. If humans were asleep, he would remain awake alone. If humans were beasts, he would live among real animals who do not pretend to be wise. He settled in caves. His companions became wind and silence. Ancient writers tell us simply, he fed on grasses and wild plants. For a Greek aristocrat, accustomed to bread, wine, and oil, this was self-annihilation. Grass is the food of cattle. By eating it, Heraclitus declared, "You who feast in the city are dead. I will become a beast." To feel the living current of Logos, his body hardened. His skin turned rough like burned parchment. His eyes grew distant. And there, in solitude, his greatest insight ripened. Everything flows watching rivers in the mountains. He understood. You cannot step into the same river twice. Everything flows. Everything changes. Even gods, even souls, even suffering. This was not poetry. It was a sentence of reality. And it would also become the curse of his own body, because nothing flows forever without consequence. You cannot step into the same river twice. For Heraclitus, this was not a beautiful metaphor. It was terror and ecstasy, of understanding. The world is a flow. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is stable. The grass he eats today becomes his flesh tomorrow, and becomes dust the day after. People in the city try to freeze a moment. They build walls. They hoard gold. They cling to names and titles, believing this will give them permanence. Fools, the only true stability is change itself. Yet while he contemplated the eternal fire of the cosmos, water began to gather inside his own body. A bitter, mystical irony. Illness and the return. A philosopher who proclaimed fire as the highest principle found himself drowning in water. Heraclitus developed dropsy, edema. His tissues swelled. His joints ached. His body grew heavy, slow, cold. Liquid filled him from within, smothering the inner flame he had worshipped all his life. He understood. He was dying. Water was winning. Death for souls is to become water, he had once written. Now his own soul seemed to dissolve inside a cold ocean of sickness. So he decided to return, not to beg forgiveness, not to seek comfort, not to lie on soft bedding. He returned to Ephesus to perform his final experiment, a terrifying and profoundly philosophical one. The return of the shadow. When Heraclitus descended from the mountains, the people of Ephesus did not recognize him. Before them stood not a former king, not a famous thinker, but something like a living tree, or a ghost, swollen with fluid, covered in tangled beard, smelling of wild herbs and damp earth. Yet his spirit was unbroken. If anything, his contempt for humanity had crystallized. He went to the physicians, but not like a patient. He did not complain. He did not plead. He tested them. He asked in a riddle, "Can you turn a downpour into a drought?" The doctors stared. They knew herbs. They knew bloodletting. They did not know logos. They did not understand that he meant, "Can you remove the excess water from my body and make me dry again?" They declared him mad. To them, he was merely an old man with a damaged mind. And then Heraclitus realized salvation, like truth, is a solitary task. If they do not understand nature, he will apply its laws himself. He turned toward the lowest substance imaginable, toward filth, toward manure. Part 2. The alchemy of filth and the triumph of fire, the philosophy of the moist soul. For Heraclitus, illness was not mechanical failure. It was a cosmic imbalance. He taught that the human soul is a spark of divine fire. The purest soul is dry. When a person sinks into pleasure, drunkenness, stupidity, the soul becomes wet. A drunk man staggers and does not know where he walks, for his soul is moist. His dropsy was not merely swelling. It was water attempting to extinguish fire, matter trying to suffocate logos. Death by dropsy meant death of a wet soul. A shameful death, unacceptable. Why manure to modern ears? Manure means filth. To an ancient Greek, manure was paradox, waste and fertility, decay and warmth, a slow-burning biological fire. Heraclitus reasoned like a protophysicist. If cold water dominates the body, it must be confronted with heat, not surface heat, deep heat. Heat born from fermentation, from decomposition, from inner combustion. So he went to a cattle yard. Imagine the scene. A descendant of kings, one of the greatest minds of antiquity, slowly undressing, his swollen body pale in twilight. Around him, cattle, the very creatures he had compared to humanity. And now, from them, he sought salvation. He ordered, or did it himself, to cover his body with fresh, steaming dung. He buried himself inside it, like a cocoon. He wanted the heat to draw the water out of him, to dry him, to purify him. This was his final argument with nature, his last attempt to turn decay into fire. Hatred as spiritual hygiene. While Heraclitus lay beneath the suffocating warmth of manure, we must ask, why was his misanthropy so absolute? He did not hate like a wounded child. He hated as an ontological realist. He believed humanity willingly rejects reason. Most people do not understand what they encounter, and even after learning, they think they know. Human speech disgusted him. Words were used to hide truth, not reveal it. The marketplace sounded to him like barking dogs. Dogs bark at what they do not understand. He despised humans for fearing death, for worshipping statues as if speaking to houses, for living inside illusions, eating grass, living in caves, burying himself in dung. All of it was an attempt to wash away the human. Grass was honest, mountains were honest, manure was honest, people were not. The fatal miscalculation. Heraclitus lay in manure beneath the burning Ephesian sun. The plan was simple. External heat. Internal heat. A greenhouse effect. He expected water to evaporate through his pores. But nature does not negotiate. His body was already too weak. Instead of drying him, the heat accelerated decay. Ancient sources say he was found dead. Some say suffocated. Some say cooked alive. Some say torn by dogs when he could no longer move. The exact manner no longer matters. What matters is this. He died as he lived, alone, defiant, at war with the universe. There are several versions of what happened next. Each one is deep. Each one is tragic. The first version says that the manure, drying under the sun, hardened into an impenetrable shell. Instead of drawing moisture out of his body, it sealed the moisture inside. The second version, more poetic and more cruel, tells us that he changed so completely and smelled so strongly of decay that even dogs no longer recognized him. Stray dogs. They sensed carrion. They sensed an animal. And they tore him apart right there, in the manure heap. What an irony. The man who said that dogs bark at those they do not understand was devoured by dogs because he had become unrecognizable. He abandoned humanity so completely that even animals no longer accepted him as one of their own. He became other. The philosophical meaning of his death in manure, is not an absurd accident. It is the final fragment of his philosophy. Heraclitus taught the unity of opposites. The way up and the way down are one and the same. Life and death, purity and filth, fire and excrement. By burying himself in manure, the highest intellect descended into the lowest matter. He demonstrated what he believed. The sage fears nothing, not even becoming waste if harmony with Logos demands it. But there is another layer. No one came to save him. No hand reached down into the filth. The people of Ephesus likely passed by, holding their noses, laughing. Look at our king. Look at our philosopher. He searched for truth and found shit. They did not understand. He did not find it. He chose it. He chose this ending as the final punctuation mark in his argument with humanity. He died alone, surrounded by decay, and the silence of gods he understood better than any mortal. The legacy of the weeping philosopher. Why was Heraclitus called the weeping philosopher? Unlike Democritus, who laughed at human stupidity, Heraclitus wept. Not from pity, from despair. He saw the world as an eternal fire, beautiful in its cruelty, just in its violence. War is the father of all, and the king of all. He saw beauty in tension, in struggle, in the stretched string of the bow and the lyre. But people wanted comfort, safety, happiness, a word Heraclitus despised. Happiness, he sneered, is when oxen find peas to eat. His hatred was a distorted form of love. Love for what humanity could become but refused to be. He hated people because they were unfinished. By going to the mountains and eating grass, he searched for primordial purity. He wanted to be like the sun, which is new every day. The sun does not ask permission. It simply burns. The path of radical purification. And Heraclitus left no system, no doctrine, only lightning flashes, fragments, riddles. For 2,500 years, humanity has tried to decipher them. But his greatest aphorism was his life, the refusal of the throne, the cave, the grass, the manure. a path of stripping away. First politics, then family, then society, then cooked food, then human appearance itself. What remained? Pure fire, a flame that flickered once inside a heap of dung in Ephesus and then vanished, only to burn forever inside the history of thought. Part 3, Cosmic Fire and the Bitterness of Truth. Before we watch his final breath, we must understand how he wrote, why his book on nature was so difficult that even great minds struggled with it. Heraclitus was called the Dark One, not as praise, as complaint. Socrates said, "What I understand is excellent. From this I conclude that what I do not understand is excellent as well. But one must be a Delian diver to reach its depths." Why did Heraclitus write in riddles? Because he despised the many. He did not want to be understood by crowds. If truth becomes common, it becomes vulgar. His style was a filter, an intellectual wall. "If you cannot break through my words," he seemed to say, "you do not belong here." His book was not an invitation. It was a verdict. Biological revolt against civilization, bread and wine were symbols of culture. Human labor, human transformation of nature. By rejecting bread, Heraclitus rejected civilization. By eating wild plants, he chose regression, not downward, but inward. Animals live by logos without knowing logos. They do not lie. They do not scheme. They do not worship illusions. By becoming animal in diet, Heraclitus sought superhuman honesty. He despised even the products of human hands. Every loaf smelled to him of ignorance. Every cup of wine tasted like stupidity. In the mountains, he drank water and chewed bitter roots, becoming as hard and dry as the stones around him. War, the father of all most philosophers, seek peace. Heraclitus despised peace. For him, peace meant stagnation, death disguised as comfort. If everything flows, then everything changes through conflict. The bow fires only because the string resists. The lyre sings only because the string is stretched. He hated humanity's longing for soft happiness. He saw in it a desire to become a corpse while still breathing. They want struggle to vanish from the world of gods and men. He wrote, "But if struggle disappears, the world itself disappears." This philosophy of war made him unbearable as a companion. Imagine complaining to Heraclitus about your suffering, and hearing in response, "Rejoice, you are still alive inside the battle. If you want peace, go to the graveyard. There is plenty of it there." His misanthropy was forged by this conviction. Humanity is a degenerated species, terrified of the only force that gives life conflict. He went into the mountains to wage his private war. Against the universe, against his body, against death itself. The world fire Heraclitus believed in ekpyrosis, the cosmic conflagration. The cosmos was not created by gods or men. It always was, is, and will be, an ever-living fire, kindling in measure and going out in measure. But hidden inside this teaching was catastrophe, a moment when fire would devour everything. And in this prophecy, there was a trace of pleasure. Heraclitus looked at Ephesus, its temples, markets, and crowds, and saw only fuel. Human beings were debris, clogging the corners of existence. "Fire will come," he said, "and judge all things." When he looked at the citizens, there was anticipation in his eyes. Not sorrow, expectation. He did not merely hate them. He believed they deserved extinction. And now his life in manure becomes even more meaningful. Dung is fuel. In antiquity, dried dung was burned for heat. By burying himself in it, Heraclitus was offering his body to the same fire he preached. A living sacrifice to transformation. Anatomy of the Sleepers, Heraclitus was the first great diagnostician of human stupidity. "For those who are awake," he wrote, "the world is one and common. For the sleeping, each turns away into his private world." People to him were sleepwalkers, They move, they speak, they reproduce, but they are not present. Present, yet absent. Think about that sentence. It is a description of modern life written 2,500 years ago. Bodies walking, souls offline. How can you rule a city inhabited by ghosts? How can you love a species that refuses to wake up? His flight to the mountains was an escape from the kingdom of shadows to the reality of stone, grass, and flame. Gold and filth Heraclitus loved overturning human values. Gold seekers dig much earth and find little gold. True gold for him was understanding logos. But his harshest comparisons were about purity. Donkeys prefer straw to gold. Pigs delight more in mud than in clean water. He saw the Ephesians as pigs, bathing in luxury, politics, pleasure. And here lies the paradox. The man who called people pigs ends his life in dung. Why? Because animal filth was purer to him than human souls. Physical dirt is honest. It obeys nature. Spiritual filth, lies, envy, stupidity was what truly disgusted him. By burying himself in manure, he performed a kind of homeopathic cure. He treated inner human filth with outer natural filth. Better to rot among animals than breathe the perfumed air of a lying city. Solitude as sovereignty. Many think Heraclitus suffered from loneliness. He did not. He ruled it. Solitude was his throne. By refusing kingship, he did not stop being a king. He became ruler of his inner cosmos. When you hate everyone, you depend on no one. No approval, no love, no friendship, only autonomy. I searched myself, he said. He needed no travels, no foreign wisdom. Everything he needed burned inside him. But autonomy has a price. When his body filled with water, no one stood beside him. His decision to go to the cowshed was the last command of a sovereign to himself. The manure cocoon, imagine the moment. The sun at its zenith, air melting. Heraclitus lies motionless, covered in dung. To others, unbearable stench. To him, the smell of chemistry, fermentation, reaction. He feels the manure drying, his skin tightening, like a caterpillar entering a chrysalis. He expects metamorphosis. Not an old sick man emerging, but a being of light. A dry soul, purified. At this point, his hatred of humanity reaches absolute stillness. He no longer cares. He is inside his private alchemy. But biology does not negotiate. Logos makes no exceptions. Fire and water wage their final battle inside him, and the substance meant to save him becomes his tomb. Part 4 Agony in the Titan's shell. The Ephesian sun turns the manure heap into a furnace. Inside, temperatures rise. Fermentation continues. The dung becomes alive. Heraclitus experiences what mystics call ego dissolution. Doctors would call it terminal heat shock. Moisture tries to leave his body, but the outer layer has hardened. An airtight crust. A pressure cooker. His flesh begins to cook in its own fluids. He hears voices in the distance. Citizens passing, laughing, talking about trade, politics. He smiles with cracked lips. Here, in stench, he is closer to truth than they are in marble halls. He becomes a meeting point of elements. Fire of the sun, fire of decay, water of disease, earth of dung. Why does he not scream? Because pride is anesthesia. Why did he not cry for help when he realized the experiment was failing? The answer is simple and terrifying. For Heraclitus, asking the sleepers for help would have been a greater disgrace than dying in excrement. His entire life was a demonstration of distance. He built a chasm between himself and humanity that could not be crossed. If he had shouted, "Help me, pull me out," he would have admitted that he was one of them, that he needed their weak hands, their shallow minds. He preferred to suffocate, to dry out, to become a mummy inside a cocoon of dung. But to preserve his intellectual purity, his hatred was his armor. The legend of the dogs. He saw the world as a child's game board, where gods move pieces for amusement, and he chose to be the piece that throws itself off the board. His silence in manure is the loudest sermon in the history of philosophy. It says, "Your world is so worthless that I choose death in animal waste rather than dependence on your mercy." There is a version of the story that Heraclitus was not only suffocated, but torn apart by dogs. Diogenes Laertius writes, "He was unable to scrape off the dung, and so remained lying there, and dogs devoured him." Let us examine this image. In antiquity, the dog symbolized a creature of instinct, yet loyal to its master. But Heraclitus once said, "Dogs bark at those they do not recognize." Here lies monstrous irony. He spent his life becoming recognizable to Logos and unrecognizable to humans. And he succeeded. Through starvation, through herbs, through filth. He altered his form so completely that even animals no longer saw a man. To the dogs, he was something else, a strange object, smelling of death and beast. They did not attack out of cruelty. They attacked because he had crossed beyond the human species. If this legend is true, his death becomes the first case of ontological suicide in history. He hated the human form so deeply that he erased it from himself and allowed nature to finish the work. I searched myself. While his body cools in a heap of dung or beneath canine jaws, we must remember his method. I searched myself. This is the key. People hate solitude because when they are alone, they discover emptiness. They flee to crowds, to theaters, to forums, anything to avoid the silence of their own nothingness. Heraclitus discovered a cosmos inside himself. He realized you cannot find the boundaries of the soul, so deep is its logos. His life in the mountains was not madness. It was radical concentration. He wanted to hear the voice of the universe without human interference. To him, people were noise. Noise that drowns out the music of the spheres. Much learning does not teach wisdom, he said. Wisdom is not information. Wisdom is seeing unity. And unity is clearest when you are alone. When you are a single point where starfire and cold earth meet. Ephesus after his death. When news spread through the city, the reaction was predictable. The crowd rejoiced. "Look," they shouted. "He thought he was divine, and he died like an animal. He despised our bread and wine, and now he has eaten dung." They believed they were mocking him. They did not understand that even in death Heraclitus defeated them. He forced upon them an image they would never forget. Not a frail old man dying quietly in bed, but a terrifying, majestic, incomprehensible monument to human will. His death became a joke for fools, and a sacred text for the wise. The Ephesians thought they had rid themselves of their critic. In truth, they had just created a ghost that would haunt Western thought for 2,500 years. 1 is 10,000 Heraclitus openly proclaimed inequality of humans before truth. His hatred was a form of intellectual justice. The best choose one thing instead of all else, eternal glory among mortals. The many stuff their bellies like cattle. He despised democracy not politically, but metaphysically. How can the majority, who cannot rule their own instincts, be trusted with truth? His mountain life was an attempt to create a state of one person. He was his own law, his own priest, his own sacrifice. There were no human rights in his universe, only duties to Logos. He ate grass to show that spirit does not depend on comfort. He buried himself in dung to show that the body is only a temporary shell, a thing to be tested to its extreme. The final irony, the man who preached fire dies through water. The man who despised cattle dies in cattle waste. From a Heraclitean view, this is not failure. It is enantiodromia, the running toward the opposite. To become pure fire, he had to pass through absolute humiliation. His death in manure was his personal world fire. His flesh burned in chemical heat to free the dry soul. He hated humans because they feared ugly endings. He walked toward his with open eyes. He turned his death into performance, into a final, radical statement against ordinary existence. Legacy of the weeping misanthrope. Heraclitus left no school. He left solitary followers. Nietzsche saw in him a kindred spirit. Hegel saw the father of dialectics. Marx borrowed his vision of eternal struggle. But one truth remains. Heraclitus would have hated them all, because he did not love thinkers. He loved truth. And truth, like fire, burns everyone equally. He would have hated the professors who dissect his fragments inside warm, comfortable offices. He would have hated the students who pass exams about him, because his true message is not in libraries, not in footnotes, not in academic debates. His true message is in that very manure, in that final rejection of civilization. He speaks to us across centuries. Truth is not in books. Truth is not in words. Truth is in what you are afraid to look at. It is in the fire that devours your illusions, and in the dirt from which you came and to which you will return. The final look from the cliff. Let us imagine him once more, back in the mountains, before the illness. He stands at the edge of a cliff. The wind moves through his gray hair. Below him, Ephesus, the sea, the endless horizon. In this moment, he is not weeping. He is triumphant. He knows what they do not know. He knows that everything is one. He knows that his hatred is only the reverse side of his love for Logos. He knows that his solitude is the highest form of belonging. He turns his back on the city and walks into the cave to eat his poor dinner of bitter herbs. He is happy, with that strange, frightening happiness known only to those who have fully escaped humanity. He is ready for manure. He is ready for dogs. He is ready for eternity. Part 5. The dark labyrinth and the triumph of invisible harmony. The logic of disgust. Why hatred was a scientific method. We continue our descent into the abyss, where Heraclitus, walled inside manure and torn by time, still speaks. We must understand one thing. His misanthropy was not mental illness. It was an epistemological tool. Most people try to know the world through conversation, collective experience, and common sense. Heraclitus believed that common sense itself is the main obstacle to truth. To see the world as it truly is, violent, shifting, burning, one must first cut away everything human. His hatred was a surgical scalpel. He cut away attachments, cities, laws, and finally, human biology itself. When he went to the mountains to eat grass, he was not going insane. He was running an experiment. What remains of Logos in a man when civilization is removed? He discovered pure, cold, merciless reason. That is why he despised the Ephesians. They were noise inside the laboratory of the cosmos. Their bustle, their prayers, their fears. Static that drowns out the hum of cosmic fire. Invisible harmony, one of his deepest sayings. Hidden harmony is better than visible harmony. People look for harmony in symmetry, stillness, soft songs. Heraclitus saw harmony in the bow, stretched to breaking, in rivers eroding their banks, in wars consuming cities. For him, the world is eternal tension. Why did he hate humans? Because they crave visible harmony. They want the world predictable, comfortable, safe. But safety is a lie. The world, for Heraclitus, is a bonfire on which existence roasts itself. He went to the mountains to witness this hidden harmony, where one animal's death becomes another's life, where rocks crumble under wind, where change reigns without apology. The grass he ate was part of this harmony. The manure he entered was its climax. Political suicide, as supreme will Heraclitus was heir to the throne. The title of Basileus meant power and sacred authority. His refusal of the crown was not laziness. It was supreme contempt. as if to say, "Your crown is a ring for a fool's head. Your power is permission to herd the blind. I choose power over myself." Politicians, to Heraclitus, are people who try to freeze the river. They write laws hoping reality will obey. But everything flows. Human laws are sandcastles before the tide. Only one law deserves respect, the law of fire. His retreat to the mountains was desertion from the army of human stupidity. He preferred to be the last creature in the forest rather than the first man in Ephesus. Heraclitus the toxicologist. Human vices to him were not moral failures. They were chemical decay. Wine makes the soul wet. Wet souls blur. Blurred souls cannot think. He hated banquets. For him, the symposium was mass suicide of reason. He watched noble men turn into mooing animals, and concluded, humanity is incurable. His herb diet was total detoxification. He tried to dry his soul into pure flame. Bitter plants give no pleasure. They give clarity. They turn flesh into dry kindling for the fire of thought. He fled from human wetness toward the burning dryness of solitude. The Ephesian epilogue. Ephesus was a jewel of Iomia. To Heraclitus, it was a latrine. He saw wealth rot character. He saw democracy become the dictatorship of mediocrity. They exiled Hermodorus, their best man. They chose comfort over wisdom. When he looked at the temple of Artemis, he saw not holiness, but vanity. People built columns to hide from the infinite sky. They worshipped gods made in their own image, jealous, greedy, petty. Heraclitus believed in a god that is day and night, winter and summer, war and peace, hunger and satiety. A god who needs no temples. A god burning in every spark and flowing in every drop of blood. His hatred of humans was religious fanaticism. He could not forgive them for turning the cosmos into a cozy shop. Eternal return Heraclitus taught the great year. All returns through world fire. The same fools. The same markets. The same exiles. Why fix what will repeat? He was not a reformer. He wanted no improvement. He wanted extinction. His mountain exile was an attempt to exit the cycle. To stand on the cliff while human history churns below. He ate grass because grass dies and returns without protest. Humans cling to identity. They fear dissolution. Heraclitus despised this fear. His leap into manure was its final expression. You are afraid of losing your face. Look at me. I cover my face with excrement, and I am still more human than you, because I know it is only a mask. Why grass? Revolt against the kitchen cooking is the art of deception. We take raw meat, we take tough plants, and with fire and spices, we turn them into something pleasant. Heraclitus saw in this another human lie. Eating raw grass in the mountains was his return to honest food. If Logos made the plant bitter, eat it bitter. Do not sweeten truth. His hatred extended even to taste itself. He believed pleasure is a trap for the wet soul. Pigs rejoice in mud more than in clean water. In this phrase lies his view of all human pleasures. The Ephesians feasting in their houses were those pigs. He, chewing a hard root on a mountainside, tasted reality itself. Harsh, unsweetened, authentic. This was the diet of a prophet preparing for final revelation. The silence of the sage. In the mountains, Heraclitus spoke little. Perhaps he wrote his book there, perhaps later, but mostly he watched. He watched the sun rise over the sea and understood. The sun is not only new each day, it is eternally new. He hated humanity's love of names. They called a river Caister and thought they knew it. Heraclitus knew there is no river. There is only movement. His misanthropy was rebellion against language itself. Words freeze. The world flows. People live among frozen words, among dead definitions. In the mountains, Among silent stones, he was free. He spoke with Logos directly, without the lying intermediary of human speech. Manure as altar, reinterpreting the final scene. Let us look again at the cowshed, but now through Heraclitus' eyes. This is not a fall. This is a triumph. He stands among cows with their huge, wet, innocent eyes. They are part of nature. Their manure is concentrated earth and grass. Entering, it was radical submission to the law of matter. If his body filled with water, he must balance it with earth and fire. He saw nothing dirty here. Dirty were the thoughts of the judges who exiled Hermodorus. Dirty were the hands of market merchants. This was only substance, warm, alive, steaming. He lies in the pile like in a cradle. He waits for healing or transformation. Here he finally defeats the human inside himself. He becomes part of the biological cycle. His hatred of people turns into total indifference. They no longer exist. There is only the heat of manure, the cold of his dropsy, and eternal Logos watching this terrible and beautiful metamorphosis. Preparation for the last fire. The crust of manure begins to harden under the setting sun. Heraclitus feels his breathing grow heavy. He understands. The experiment is ending. But not as planned. His hatred serves him one last time. It gives him strength. Not to call for help. He dies in silence, broken only by the lowing of cows and the buzzing of flies. He leaves life as he lived it, alone, misunderstood, rejecting everything. He leaves his corpse in filth as a final riddle for Ephesus. Solve this if you can. Look what your basileus becomes, your sage. And know, the same awaits you, your temples, your laws. When the great fire comes. Part 6. Echo from the underworld and the shadow of Heraclitus over the future. Posthumous hum, the body cools. But his spirit, the dry fire he protected, begins its real journey. The Ephesians face a problem. What to do with the corpse of a man who cursed them? Some say, throw him outside the walls. Others remember his royal blood, but Heraclitus denies them all. He leaves no clean body, no beautiful face, only hardened filth. This is his last lesson. Truth is never neat. Truth smells of sweat, dung, and decay before it ignites as eternal light. The Stoics and the taming of fire centuries later, Stoics appear. They take his logos, but they comb it, they wash it, they make it gentle, they remove the manure. They keep only the fire. But can you understand Heraclitus without his dirt? Without his grass? Without his total rupture from humanity? Stoics wanted to serve society. Heraclitus saw society as organized sleep. He hated people not because they err, but because they exist in a tiny world separate from the cosmos. For him, there was no civic duty, only duty to world fire. Logos and the gospel, the strangest turn. In the beginning was the Logos, written in Ephesus. Christians called Heraclitus a pagan prophet. Imagine him meeting them. A lover of war, a hater of crowds. Facing a religion of meekness, he would laugh. Love your neighbor? The neighbor who exiled Hermodorus? The neighbor who sleeps beneath cosmic fire? For Heraclitus, Logos was not a person. It was law, impersonal, cruel, beautiful. He hated humans because they demand consolation. Nietzsche and Heraclitus's Logos did not comfort. It burned. Friedrich Nietzsche became the true brother of Heraclitus across centuries. A reincarnation in the mountains of Sils Maria. Nietzsche understood the core of Heraclitean hatred. He wrote, "The world eternally needs truth," which means the world eternally needs Heraclitus. Like Heraclitus, Nietzsche went into the mountains. Like Heraclitus, he despised the herd animal. He saw in the Ephesian sage the first man who dared to say yes to eternal return, to tragic chaos, to existence without guarantees. The grass diet became, in Nietzsche, intellectual fasting. The manure heap became a metaphor for human culture itself, a place where the philosopher must bury himself in order to be reborn as the overman. Nietzsche knew. Heraclitus' hatred was not the bitterness of a failed man. It was the fury of a mountaineer who sees people building tiny houses at the foot of a volcano and calling it safety. The ecology of spirit Heraclitus hated them for their blindness, for their inability to live at altitude, where the air is thin, where food is bitter, where thinking hurts. Let us return again to his strange diet. Grass, wild plants, roots. Today, we would call it radical veganism. For him, it was an ontological fast. In Greek, poa does not simply mean grass. It means wild growth, vegetation untouched by human care. By eating it, Heraclitus swallowed wildness itself. He wanted a body built from elements never domesticated by hands. He hated humans because they domesticated everything. They turned wild fire into hearth fire. They turned rivers into irrigation channels. They turned thought into rhetoric. Eating grass was an attempt to regain a feral mind. He wanted to think the way grass grows, without permission, without apology, obeying only sun and rain. The physics of flow. Heraclitus' hatred was directed at the artificial. For him, an Ephesian eating spiced meat was a creature drowning in lies. The taste itself was the taste of conformity. If Heraclitus lived today, he would not go to protests. He would not go to universities. He would go to particle accelerators, to places where matter dissolves into energy, where nothing is stable, where only probabilities exist. He anticipated quantum reality. You cannot step into the same river twice. People hate this truth. They want their chair to stay the same, their house to stay the same, their self to stay the same. They build life on the illusion of stability. Heraclitus despised this clinging. He knew there is no ground, only current, only flow. Death in manure, his death was proof. The hard crust of dung is only a temporary shell. Under it, everything ferments, transforms, moves. He hated humans for their fear of change, for their terror before the abyss, for their moralizing. For the God, all things are beautiful and just. Humans call some things unjust, others just. Morality, for him, was an attempt to freeze the cosmos. Manure is mirror. Why manure? Because manure is what humans reject. Not me, not mine. By burying himself in it, Heraclitus performed supreme provocation. He told them, "What you call disgusting is my medicine. What you call a clean life is my infection." His misanthropy was reflective. He returned their disgust magnified. He made his body grotesque to reveal the grotesque soul. His hatred was the hatred of a free being towards slaves of decency. Loneliness as architecture, Heraclitus built his solitude like a fortress. No windows toward streets. Only a hole in the roof opening to stars and fire. These questions betray sleepers. For Heraclitus, human warmth was suffocating. He wanted cold brilliance. His mountains were not exile. They were coronation. He hated humans for their inability to endure silence. They stuffed silence with noise. He made silence his ally. Grass and manure. When dropsy breached his walls, he sealed them with dung, defending his inner citadel to the last breath. Why? Because those who truly hate humanity leave the deepest riddles. He became a splinter in collective consciousness. We try to understand him because he is the voice inside us that sometimes wants to flee. He is our right to rage, to disgust, to reject false values. His hatred is medicinal, like ice water on the face. You are not the center. You are sparks. Burn brightly. Do not merely smoke. Final chord crying in fire, we traveled from golden thrones to foul cowsheds. We saw a man too large for his city and too proud for his species. Heraclitus of Ephesus remains there, on the border of history, covered in hardened dung, holding bitter grass. His eyes are closed, but his logos whispers in wind and flame. He hated humans because he loved truth. He chose the divine. He paid with the human. He entered manure to become a star. And as long as rivers flow and fires burn, that is Logos. Epilogue Heraclitus is not a textbook name. He is a radical challenge to what it means to be human. He proved that one can abandon everything power, society, comfort, cleanliness, and still become immortal. His hatred was his fuel. His solitude was his laboratory. His death was his final fragment. Dark, brilliant. Let this story remain with you as a reminder, never extinguished. And when the last fire fades, when cities fall silent, when names are erased like writing in sand, he will still be there, not as a man, not as a body. No longer hates. He has become what he always saw, the flow, the flame, the faceless law. And perhaps right now, as you close your eyes, as the screen goes dark, as silence arrives, and he whispers, do not seek comfort. Do not seek safety. Do not seek a gentle truth. Become fire. Become river. Become one who is not afraid to burn, because everything else is sleep, and only fire is real. The end.